They called it the Green Hell, a battle so horrific that veterans would wake up screaming for decades. When asked what happened, most would simply shake their heads and walk away. This is the story of Peleliu, the forgotten nightmare of World War II. Setup 020, September 15, 1944. The 1st Marine Division hits the beaches of a tiny island in the Pacific. Military command promised it would take 4 days. It took 73. What they found waiting wasn't just an enemy. It was a killing field designed by a genius of death. The Trap 050. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa had transformed Peleliu into something the Marines had never seen. Forget the suicidal bonsai charges. Forget fighting on the beaches. Nakagawa dug 500 caves into the coral ridges. He installed sliding steel doors. He built a labyrinth of tunnels connecting every position. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution chamber. The hell begins 125. The Marines thought they'd learned jungle warfare. They were wrong. Temperatures hit 115 degrees. Men dropped from heat stroke before they even saw the enemy. The coral dust got everywhere, in their eyes, their wounds, their lungs. But the heat wasn't the killer. The ridges were. Bloody Nose Ridge, 2 minutes. The Umurbrogel Mountains. The Marines called it Bloody Nose Ridge. Imagine this. You're climbing jagged coral that cuts through your boots. Machine gun fire erupts from a cave 50 feet above you. You return fire. The Japanese retreat deeper into the mountain. You advance. Then mortars rain down from positions you can't even see. And then, at night, the enemy emerges through tunnels behind you and retakes it while you sleep. Every day, Marines would charge the same ridge they'd taken the day before. Every day, they'd lose men to the same positions. The Japanese had pre-measured every inch of terrain. Their artillery was so precise, they could drop shells into a foxhole from a mile away. One regiment, the 1st Marines, lost 71% of its men in 6 days. 71%. Combat veterans from Guadalcanal broke down and wept. Eugene Sledge, who wrote the most brutal memoir of the Pacific War, described Peleliu as beyond comprehension. Wounded men begged to stay on the line because they knew the Marines replacing them would die, learning what they already knew. Water ran out. Medical supplies ran out. Sanity ran out. Here's what made it unbearable. You almost never saw the Japanese. They'd fire from cave mouths, then vanish. You'd throw in grenades, they'd throw them back. You'd use flamethrowers. They'd retreat to chambers with steel doors where the fire couldn't reach. You'd seal a cave with explosives. They'd emerge from a tunnel 100 yards away the next morning. How do you fight an enemy that's inside the earth itself? The Japanese knew psychological warfare. They'd leave wounded Marines in the open, waiting for a corpsman to come help. Then they'd shoot the corpsman. They'd mimic American voices in the dark. Corpsman, corpsman. Men stopped responding to cries for help because they didn't know what was real. They'd tie grenades to the bodies of dead Marines. The war crimes were so frequent, they stopped being shocking. The Meat Grinder, 525. 5 Coral Ridge, Waltz Ridge, the 5 Sisters. Every ridge had a name, and every name meant death. Marines would take a position at dawn, fight off counterattacks all day. Then overnight, Japanese infiltrators would crawl through the pitch-black coral and slit throats in the foxholes. Morning would come. Do it again. For weeks. The unraveling, 600. Men started coming apart. Shell shock wasn't a weakness. It was inevitable. One Marine stood up in the middle of a firefight and started walking toward the Japanese lines. He was smiling. Another dug a foxhole for 3 days straight, 12 hours at a time, going deeper and deeper until his friends pulled him out. Some stopped talking entirely. Their eyes went empty. Even technology couldn't save them. Flamethrowers were supposed to be the solution, but caves amplified the backblast, burning the operator. Tanks got stuck in the coral. Artillery barely scratched the underground fortifications. The Marines were reduced to the most primitive warfare imaginable, crawling into caves with knives and grenades, fighting hand-to-hand in the dark. By October, The Marines were fighting for ridges that had no strategic value. Command wouldn't admit the island was already secured. Men died for hills the army would abandon a month later. That's when you knew it had gone too far, when the killing outlasted the reason for it. November 24th. Colonel Nakagawa burned the regimental colors and committed ritual suicide. His remaining soldiers launched one final suicidal charge. When it was over, only 202 Japanese soldiers out of 11,000 had survived. They'd held out for 73 days. The American casualties? Nearly 10,000. For an island that military historians now agree was completely unnecessary to invade. When the survivors came home, they didn't talk. Not to reporters, not to family, not to each other. There were no parades for Peleliu, no songs, no movies for decades. Other battles became famous. Iwo Jima, Okinawa. But Peleliu? Men would change the subject if you mentioned it. Some literally took their stories to the grave. Why? Because what do you say about a battle that should never have happened? How do you explain watching your friends die for a base that was never used? The army bombed the airfield from Peleliu before it was even secured. The island was bypassed by the main invasion force. Every death there was wasted, and the men who survived knew it. Here's what the military didn't want you to know. Intelligence had warned that Peleliu was heavily fortified. Admirals recommended skipping it, but General MacArthur wanted it as a stepping stone for his ego-driven return to the Philippines. Admiral Halsey called the invasion a terrible waste. Historians now call it one of the most controversial battles of the war. But by then, thousands were already dead. Decades later, Marines who served there would still wake up gasping. Eugene Sledge wrote that he saw Peleliu in every dark space for the rest of his life. One veteran said he couldn't go into basements because they reminded him of the caves. Another said the smell of coral dust could send him into a panic attack 40 years later. That's the real casualty count, not just the dead, but the living who were never the same. Today, Peleliu is quiet. Tourists rarely visit. The caves are still there, rusted guns still inside them. Some tunnels have never been fully explored. The jungle has reclaimed most of it. But if you go to the ridges, Bloody Nose Ridge especially, you can still find shattered equipment, bullet casings, fragments of bone. The island refuses to let go of what happened. The lesson, 1205. So why does this battle matter? Because it represents something darker than just military failure. It's what happens when pride overrides reason, when leaders spend lives like currency to avoid admitting a mistake. The Battle of Peleliu killed thousands of men so that commanders could save face. And the cruelest part? The men who died there knew it was pointless. They just couldn't stop it. The soldiers of Peleliu didn't refuse to speak because they were traumatized, though they were. They refused to speak because the truth was too damning. They'd survived hell only to realize it was a hell someone else chose for them. That's why it's the forgotten battle. Because remembering it means confronting a truth we'd rather ignore. Sometimes the greatest enemy isn't across the battlefield. It's in the command tent behind you. The green hell of Peleliu, where 10,000 Americans became casualties for an island that never mattered. And the men who survived carried that weight in silence until their last breath.